Hello, welcome to Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. I'm your host, Tabitha Ziegler. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We've got an amazing guest today. Kay, introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kay Anderson. I'm a mom. I've got two girls. I've got a 6-year-old autistic daughter and an 8-year-old neurodiverse kiddo who also has dyslexia. And I am the owner of a space called Prana Play. It's a sensory haven intentionally designed for families that have both special needs kids and also families that have neurotypical kiddos.
And that's where we met. So coincidentally, whenever you're in the autism space in Indiana, it becomes sort of a small pool, and anybody that's doing anything nonprofit, organizational, or whatever, generally you start to run into one another. So we have mutual friends, and that's how I met Kay. I think Kay is an amazing human, and she brought something to my attention because I do a lot of like disability rights, disability justice, and advocacy. Hence, advocacy is in the title of this podcast. So I'm just going to let her take the floor and walk you through a recent development that I think everybody should be aware of. So go ahead, Kay.
Yeah, so I'm kind of going to give like a quick high level view, but I grew up in upstate New York and I grew up in the private school system. So big fan of it. Now, good, bad, right or wrong, you can say that that's good, but that was just my lived experience. And oftentimes like our lived experience is, helps shape what we have from a future perspective. So fast forward to the time when my girls were going to go to school and I enrolled both of my girls at Park Tutor, which was the choice that we made as a family, and we felt really good about it. And my youngest daughter, Olivia, started in pre-K or kind of pre-kindergarten, and we had a really good experience with her. During that time frame when she was there and my youngest was getting ready to go in, I had been diagnosed with really advanced breast cancer and was going through kind of a lot of chemotherapy, surgeries, and all these different things. And I really believe that you rely on the experts to kind of take the reins, right? So like the experts are the teachers, they're the ones that are accountable, they're the ones that are going to flag things if things are going wrong or things are bad. So originally my youngest daughter ended up in first grade, and there had been some signs and signals all along that potentially there was some complexities with reading as her scores were going backwards versus going forward. Now, one could argue that with a breast cancer diagnosis in a family, that's a lot of chaos for a kiddo to have to endure. That would be likely normal. So I didn't really chalk it up to anything. But when we get into first grade, she ultimately really struggled with reading and was later diagnosed with dyslexia. And we had a really traumatic and difficult experience because as she was going into school and as she was struggling, her brain was convinced that every answer was correct. And the reality is it wasn't. So like 9 times out of 10, the teacher would ask a question, she would raise her hand and she would be like, I know the answer to that. That's a dog. And then her peers would be like, no, that's not dog, that's dad, right? Because she would mix the letters up in essence. And so I was really disappointed by a lot of the strategies that were put in place, but the school had been pretty honest that, a disability of the nature of dyslexia is not something that they were really set up for success to support. And so we made the decision to pull her out of school mid-year, out of first grade, and pull her back a year and put her into kindergarten in Westfield Public Schools. Now, it was the absolute best decision for my daughter because her self-esteem had started to tank. And I believe that, confidence and self-esteem is like one of the number one predictors of success. You can always overcome the intellectual complexities. And so we pulled her out, put her back a year. And during that time frame when I was working with Park Tutor to, get some tuition reimbursement based on the diagnosis, and was also trying to get to the bottom of like what exactly was going on, I really struggled to get things from them. So the DIBELS report, or the DIBELS, is a test, a standardized test that's done for reading, and it's given to kids 2 times a year, and it tracks their progress, and it's standardized across the board. I had lost mine in the process of everything and had requested on multiple occasions to have these reports sent from Park Tutor. And they refused to send them to me, which I thought was kind of interesting, right? They refused to send the reports. At first time, the national database was down and they couldn't access them. And then they just kind of refused to send them. I was like, huh, that's kind of curious. Like, that's a little bit odd. Not long story short, I dug through my files, I found them, and the trends were very clear. From the beginning, she was trending under significantly to the point where she likely really shouldn't have been pushed forward to first grade. And that kind of begs the question of like, why? Were they really advocating for her best interests? I'm not sure. Okay. So now we fast forward to my youngest daughter, who will, when she entered Park Tutor, we were very clear she came in with a diagnosis of autism. They were very honest with me to say that that's not necessarily their strength, but that they felt that she could flourish at Park Tutor with the right support. And we had 2 years of really good experience, primarily driven by the teacher that she had who really understood the sensory sensitivities that Victoria needed and the accommodations that she needed. And in that summer, one of the things with dyslexia and learning disabilities in general is your brain can't really take a break. Okay. So you have to ensure that you don't take that summer break that so often kids get because you can really regress. And so we were working with a tutoring center that has a specialized approach to dyslexia. And she was planning to go for the summer. And in fairness to my daughter, smart little cookie, she's like, Mom, why do I have to go to school over summer if sister does not have to go to school? Oh, okay, fair point. So mom decides I'm going to put both of them in tutoring over the summer so that it feels fair. And my youngest daughter just gets the benefit of some additional reading, some additional math. I mean, it's good for her brain in general. So, like, I didn't think anything of it. And we're lucky enough that we could afford to do it. So we put both of them in it. And this tutoring system is so good. They see lots of learning disabilities. They specialize in dyslexia and other types of central processing disorders. And they flagged for me right towards the end of the summer
And
that
what
there was
program were you using?
this is the Lindner Learning Center, and it's a similar program like
Okay.
Ortman and Gillingham. It's not quite that one, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
very formalized program that's designed specifically to help kiddos learn the rules of language in a way that helps them decode and be successful at learning. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked. They called me and they were like, "There's a significant challenge with your daughter from an intellectual disability perspective." And I was like, "Whoa, intellectual disability? What? Like, are you sure?" And they were like, "Look,
Mm-hmm.
we're not quite sure what it is, but she's really struggling to both learn and retain the information. And so we don't think it's necessarily dyslexia, but we believe that it's something more. And we are really concerned." And so I was like, okay. So I then started to dig into like her scores and her information. And it also trended in a way that was not suggestive of her being successful or even sort of at average for her grade level from a reading perspective. And so, given
Mm-hmm.
the experience that we had had with my older daughter, where they were absolutely not able to support her dyslexia without us paying to put in significant amount of tutoring services into the school, we made the tough decision
Mm-hmm.
to pull Victoria 2 weeks prior to school starting and put her into public school so that she could have the support from a reading and a intellectual perspective that a public school offers. Okay. Now, I will tell you, when she went to public school, she tested in the second percentile across her entire grade. She was the lowest intellectually of her entire class. Okay. Second percentile.
Mm.
Cannot write her name accurately 9 out of 10 times. Okay. So now that what that says to you is, okay, mom, as a parent, what that means is you need to put the support in place for your daughter to be successful. And so
Mm-hmm.
I made the tough call. It wasn't what we planned to do. It wasn't what we really wanted to do, especially with autistic kids. Consistency and clarity is super
Mm-hmm.
important. And we had already told her that she was going back to Park Tutor where all her friends were, where all her teachers that she knew were. So we already knew that this was going to be a
Mm-hmm.
challenge. And I was blown away by the response. I sent the message to the head of the lower school. No one called. No one reached out.
Hmm.
No one asked, how's your daughter? Oh my gosh, like this is really difficult. Not only does she have a diagnosis of autism, but she also potentially has a learning disability that may be pretty significant,
Yeah.
right? On one hand, she learns information differently because she's autistic. And so she can learn and memorize songs like, hey, mom, why don't you know the words to that Taylor Swift song? And I'm like, oh my gosh, Siri, help me, right? But on the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
her
Mm-hmm.
brain doesn't process the same way perhaps you and I do. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, why are they not responding? Why don't they care about my daughter? Why are they not reaching out? Like, this is not like we're moving to Montana or we've made a random decision and
Mm-hmm.
or we can't afford it. No, like none of these things are true. We just want to have her to
Mm-hmm.
have the best support possible. So fast forward, there's
Right.
a process at the school and there's a process and you can opt for insurance because the tuition is
Mm-hmm.
$26,000 a year for one child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a lot of money, right? A lot of
Ooh.
money that you're putting into a system to give your kid
Well, that's a lot of money for anybody from Indiana, generally.
correct, right? It's a lot of money. And we as a family decided that education is really important. And that was where we were going to spend our discretionary funds. Okay. Which we're super fortunate that
Mm-hmm.
that's a possibility, even a possibility for us to entertain. Okay. So
Sure.
the insurance requires that, there's a physician or there's documentation that states that there's a legitimate reason why your child would withdraw, such that it would void the contract. And then, you know, you would not have to pay, they would have to pay. Okay. So they came back
Mm-hmm.
after, interactions with the psychologist and the learning center, et cetera, and
Mm-hmm.
covered $19,659 of the tuition reimbursement. So I thought, great,
Mm-hmm.
case closed, problem solved. Like, this is unfortunate for everybody, right? Like, it wasn't what we planned, it
Right.
wasn't what they planned, etc. Fast forward to today, and we had received a notification that we still owed $6,930. And I was like, like I should probably dig into this.
Okay.
Like I should call someone. This feels a little bit unusual. I wonder why this is the case. The tuition reimbursement was already in
Mm-hmm.
place. Well, this is for like the before and
Mm-hmm.
after care, okay? So that you pay for and the other kind of pieces that she never received. So fast
Mm-hmm.
forward to yesterday, and the sheriff showed up at my house and served us with lawsuit, a lawsuit
Wow.
from the Park Tudor Foundation to Kay Anderson for the tuition of Victoria Ryman. I'm struggling. Like, I'm actually flabbergasted. Like, help me understand why someone didn't pick up the phone and call me. No one. No one called out of concern for my daughter. And so I just am really struggling with the fact that, like, not only have they received $12 million from the Lilly Foundation in December of 2025, on top of an additional
Hmm.
400 plus $1,000 prior to help children learn. What children? Other people's children? Because
Hmm.
my two children have intellectual disabilities, both of them. One is
Mm-hmm.
dyslexia and one
Yeah.
has like a more central processing. And they're both
Mm-hmm.
neurodiverse. So one is autistic,
Oh
went
yeah.
in clearly with an autism diagnosis, and the other one has ADHD. And I'm struggling to understand how this can happen now and why this isn't discrimination against us. Like, send it to collections if we really feel
Well.
like we need like $6,000. But we're going to serve a lawsuit to me. I can't. Like, I don't even have words to, like, this is a public school that has millions and millions of dollars, and they want to go after a mom and a family that withdrew their daughter, not because they wanted to, but because she has an intellectual disability that they have proven with the older child that they couldn't support. So it's not like I was guessing,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I hope that they could. I wonder if they can't. No, they were very clear. They do not support
Mm-hmm.
dyslexia. That's on me. I've got to go out and I've got to partner with the tutors, and they'll pull her out of class and take her away from her friends during those time frames so that she learns a different way. Well, that feels like
Mm-hmm.
the 1950s. We also had experiences
Well,
where, right?
go on.
We also had an experience where, you know, we got a lot of homework with our daughter who has dyslexia. And I decided that that wasn't worth it. I mean, we're in kindergarten, like we in
Mm-hmm.
first grade. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't make her do her homework.
Yeah.
Come to find out, she's now anxious about having to do her homework. I'm like, what's going on, hun? And she's like, well, if I don't do my homework, the teacher tells everybody and makes me sit out during recess and do my homework. And so now we're in a shame based environment. So now we are shaming my daughter who's struggling to read, who has dyslexia,
Yeah.
and punishing her. I mean, we might as well be clapping erasers. I mean, this is not okay. Like, this is not the type of environment that I want for my kid. I'm thrilled that we moved
Mm-hmm.
to public schools now. And getting
Mm.
served by the sheriff yesterday from the Park Tutor Foundation without a phone call, without a text message, without a smoke signal. I mean, I don't know. Are you kidding me?
Well,
I just don't understand.
I have something to read that I think would bring a bit of clarity. Now, mind you, I am not a legal professional, but I've had many conversations. I've dug into quite a few things, and I have children with disabilities myself. And I also have a disability. So I have three children that currently have IEPs. And for those that don't know what that is, that's an individualized education plan. That's something specifically that they use in public school so that they can accommodate the special learning requirements of your child. Right. So, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is often referred to as the ADA, Title III regulations. So the summary of this final rule is the final rule revises the Department of Justice Department regulation that implements Title III of the Americans with Disability Act relating to non-discrimination on the basis of disability by public accommodations and in commercial facilities. The department is issuing this final rule in order to adopt enforceable accessibility standards under the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. That are consistent with the minimum guidelines and requirements issued by the Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Board, and to update or amend certain provisions of the Title III regulation so that they comport with the department's legal and practical experiences in enforcing the ADA since 1991. Concurrently, with the publication of this final rule for Title III, the Department is publishing a final rule amending its ADA Title II regulation, which covers non-discrimination on the basis of disability in state and local government services. Now, I wanted to read that specifically to say there is this misconception that private schools are completely exempt from following the ADA, and that would not be accurate. Often what happens is families then need to pursue legal counsel to sue these schools. Coincidentally, this school is getting the jump on you, which I find hysterical. Now, mind you, not a lawyer, not offering legal advice. But if I were in your shoes, I would be contacting someone that could give me some significant legal advice because you are correct. There is an obligation federally and state, even though Indiana right now is part of that lawsuit that they do not want to be beholden to 504s. And, there's this major push for charter schools, specifically religious charter schools, private schools, that then they can give monies in place of public school. That would essentially disenfranchise most disabled students. Now, disabled can look a lot of ways, and as we know, invisible disability carries its own problems. So our kids are in the invisible disability category. And
Absolutely.
oftentimes that makes people take them less seriously, but their needs are not less significant than someone that, say, is in a wheelchair and requires a ramp. So I would pose this question. I wonder how many actual physically disabled students Park Tutor has, in addition to the invisible disabilities, because you're not the first person that I've heard a story like this from that has a child in Park Tutor. And Park Tutor, from what I read, which I knew it was long established, had been around for a long time, it was essentially two schools that joined together. So you had a girls' school and a boys' school that joined together in the early 1900s. And from that point has sort of become, has a reputation rather, for having a very astute, very learned education system and teachers, and these children are supposed to be the creme de la creme that then rise to the occasion to go to Harvard and Yale and all of the things.
Right.
As we know, disability is non-discriminatory. It does not matter how much money you have, what background you come from, what religion you practice, or whatever. So I think it's, at the very least, extremely interesting that in this current set of circumstances, especially politically, that Park Tudor would make the choice, because it's a choice,
It's a
to
choice.
sue a disabled family to prove a point, I would imagine. And you have to wonder how many other disabled families have been run off, discriminated against, sued, that have not come forward. You might just be the first one to pop the top on this. But this, I would imagine, because of how they've chosen to handle it. And I say choose specifically because this is a choice,
It is a choice.
to be so, yeah, to be so just nonchalant about, like, this is what we're laying down and this is what you're going to do, and then you say, not today, Satan.
Well, and I mean, I kind of wonder, right? So like we look at the families that are in there, and I'm nowhere near the Ursay family that's currently in the same grade as Olivia
Sure.
and Victoria. I'm nowhere near the
Mm-hmm.
the magnitude of wealth of these multi-billionaires that have their kiddos in there. And so and I know for a
Mm-hmm.
fact, because many of my friends have kids that are there, there's a wait list, right? So it's not like we're
Mm-hmm.
taking away an opportunity and money from a family. I have a friend who's got a sibling that they thought would get in no problem, and they're waitlisted. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
bummer for them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but at the end of the day, like, is it because I don't have enough money as a family or status or power? Or is it because actually, quite
Mm.
frankly, my kids have disabilities? But I agree with you. They're choosing to prove a point. They don't care about my girls. They don't care about them at all, because if they
Mm-mm.
cared about them, someone with any sort of power in the school would have picked up
Mm-hmm.
the phone and called the school psychologist, the head of school, the head of lower school. No one, not one human being bothered to say, "Are your girls okay? What's going on? Perhaps we could do A, B, or C." No, it was like I mortally
Mm-hmm.
offended them
Mm-hmm.
by pulling my kids out of their elite school because somehow it was a knock on them. When the reality is, all I want is for my girls to be able to read, to be able to get the support that they need, to be able to flourish. Victoria is now in public school, and I'm not, and she does have an IEP, right? An individual education plan. And that was not without challenges to get in place in itself. But she continues to track at the low end of the percentile range because of this disability. And we all know that early intervention, the data is clear. Early intervention and educationally is everything. You can't close a gap if you don't intervene early. And so I, as a mom, want to set my kids up for success because I know that they can be as successful as anyone else, but they need and require more support. And that's why we have these laws. And so I think it's a brilliant idea. I would love the opportunity to discuss this case in great detail. And I would love to take on, you know, this challenge because it's not fair. If it's happening to me, it's happening to other people too. And I'm sorry, but like, it's not
I, kn-
okay.
I know a few people I bet I could put you in contact with.
Okay, that would be great. And it's what I find so
Yeah.
ironic is like, you couldn't get a bigger believer in the private school system. I grew up in upstate New York in a school system that was a boys and a girls school system that went together, that was a private school. And then I graduated in a class of 52. And academically, I excelled. I went to college. I went to state school, which was kind of forbidden for like a private school. Like that was like a black mark, but that was the choice that our family made. And I mean, I excelled, right? It was a piece of cake college. And I attribute that to the academic rigor of that school. So you're not talking about someone who doesn't have lived experience. So I wanted this to work. And what I'm finding is the dark underbelly and the reality is that it's not good. And I don't want other kids to not also be around or accept other kids that are different from them because that's what makes us uniquely human and that's what makes us a better society is that we all have differences. And if none of those kids are around any kids with hidden disabilities, then I think that's a problem. Because what's going to say that when they're in charge or the CEO of a corporate company, that they're not going to then also do those things because they haven't had the exposure to it?
I've got lots of opinions, and as you know, we've had very different upbringings. Like this is what makes this conversation so interesting, right? Because we probably couldn't be more polarized. I grew up
Right.
very like lower, probably middle class for like a good chunk of my life. Then my parents, got a little higher, got a little bit more money. Um, I don't think any of us in my family would have ever considered us past middle class. And so all of my family went to public school. I went to a state school. I was the first person in my family, I believe, to finish a 4-year like state education. There was a lot of pressure on me to finish. Turns out, come to find out, after I have 3 children with disabilities, and then I look back and I'm seeing myself in them, then I go to get myself tested, find out that I have autism. I say that specifically to say putting too much pressure on a child can make them burn out in a
Yeah.
myriad of ways. Had I known when I was younger that I had autism, I think I would have been equally successful, but I would have been able to regulate. I probably would have not had some of the issues that I did have, especially socially, because there was so much pressure on me as a female, as a person with a disability, which I did not know, to perform and
Yeah.
perfect. And flash forward, now I'm 43. I don't want that for my kids. And I watch children, even in a public education system, sort of get pushed aside. And
Yeah.
this is why I have strong feelings about public schools. Now, I never had the experience of private schools to start with, but I do think there should be a standard across the board, right? And this is where the ADA comes in. Like, this was the whole purpose of it, to basically tell these institutions you cannot legally discriminate against these people. Like, they are part of the populace. If you want to do business, much like Eli Lilly, right? I would imagine, I've not been inside their corporate headquarters, but I would imagine that they were accommodating sufficiently for the ADA,
Yeah.
handrails,
They
ramps,
are.
special, access in bathrooms. So I find it really interesting because everybody has their opinions, but from what I've seen, it would appear that Lilly has made significant donations to different institutions for the sake of things like education.
Hmm.
I've heard that a decent amount, being that they seem to want to embrace the ADA. I wonder what Eli Lilly would even think about this.
I think it's a really good question. I worked for 21 years at Eli Lilly and Company, and all of many of the children that are of executives at Lilly also go to Park Tutor. The current CEO's children go to Park Tutor. The prior CEO's grandchildren go to Park Tutor. And so, I agree. And my experience at Eli Lilly and Company is that they do a phenomenal job of accommodating disabilities, whether they're hidden disabilities or visible disabilities. There's scooters when you come in through the parking lot at the doors, so that there's people that need scooters that need to go inside versus outside, don't have to take them through the turnstiles, right? We have lots of programs in place around sort of mental health disabilities or hidden disabilities. And so I do think it's interesting to think that through, because I don't think that that's aligned with their philosophy or their current practices, which from every experience that I had, both as a leader as well as an employee, would suggest otherwise. Um, and so I find it interesting that for our little humans that are the future for all of us, right? Our kids, that we feel like there should be different rules or there should be exceptions to the rule. Because this feels a little bit like maybe they're trying to prove a point and this is what they do to absolutely everybody. But every case is unique and different, right? If I just said, like, well, we changed our mind. So sorry, we don't like you anymore. That would be one thing. Or maybe if I just said, like, hey, we've decided to move to Florida and they don't have someone to fill the spot. Fair game. But that's not the situation. And an insurance company came in and said, you know what, we agree. For $19,000, we're going to cover your charges. So do we really need to go directly from that to a lawsuit? I mean, it feels like there's so many ways to go in between there. And did I get a couple emails? Sure. But I'm in the process of building a business. Life happens. Life gets busy. We haven't even been one calendar year. Not one calendar year. So this feels purposeful. This feels targeted.
Well, I think also this is just a larger conversation that's going on right now. I mean, the public school system is just being battered. And I find it really interesting, right, that those of us that have kids with disabilities, they are the only places for our kids, really. And the more and more that you take money out of these public schools that actually accommodate IEPs and 504 plans, and most likely would be willing to work with your child, I find it really, really interesting, like I said, at this particular moment in time, that politically, whether it's statewide or federally, it would seem now is the time to make moves like that. Now is the time, if you are only about money and not about humanity, because this is what I'm taking from it.
That's what I
To
take
have
from
an
it too.
organization to have an organization that is extremely wealthy and is taking in major donations from other organizations, businesses that have an exorbitant amount of wealth compared to your average citizen. We're just going to use Indiana right now because Park Tudor happens to be in Indianapolis. There are people in this state that don't make $26,000 an entire year. And to just put that into perspective, and this is not a diss for anybody that chooses to send their child to a public school, to a private school. I'm just trying to put it out there for perspective.
Yeah.
There are kids right now in rural communities with disabilities that are being bussed out of their school system to go to the closest school system that can accommodate them because of their disability.
Yeah.
And then you have, I'm going to call them a business, because I think you reach a certain amount of wealth and then you become a business. So Park Tutor is more of a business than an educational facility. And they have the amount of wealth that they could make significant impact in their communities. And instead of finding ways to maybe help the other kids in Indianapolis, not just in Park Tutor, but if you are teaching children that have an obscene amount of wealth that are, going into these spaces, they will be the people that one day hypothetically will be the CEOs of some of these companies. You are doing them a disadvantage to not
You
show
are.
them what humanity, humility, and advocating for disabilities and people that don't look, act, talk like them. You're not doing them a service, you're doing them a disservice if you are modeling to them how to actively discriminate against their peers.
And let me give you an example. Let me just give you a tiny example. My beautiful oldest daughter who has dyslexia learns differently. And we're going to pull her out of the classroom to learn so that none of the other kids can see, versus just accommodating in the moment, right? Maybe having a one-on-one reading with a teacher versus with her peers, because when she gets it wrong, she doesn't want to be embarrassed. Is that so difficult of an ask? I would argue no. So that happened. That's a real experience that I have personally had with my daughter. And so the kids around her, did they benefit? No, I would argue they did not. Everybody else is going to look just like them. They're going to be a little bit above average academically. They're going to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll tell you, it's interesting. Like, I was originally told, oh, you know what? We've got about a third of the class in extra support for reading because they're behind. Help me understand how that's possible. Like, that feels like a school problem, not a kid problem. If a third of your class that came from the prior grade is needing extra support, have we not set the kids up for success? Like, I don't know. That feels a little bit strange as well. So there's lots of things that made me go, But the one that really, really strikes the chord in my heart is I have two girls who look just like everyone else that's there, yet struggle. And the anxiety that goes along with getting it wrong 9 times out of 10 because your brain tells you that it's right is really difficult. And that can lead to, without intervention and without support, other really difficult things like mental health disorders and other pieces. And that's not going to be the fate of my children, because I'm going to advocate really hard for them and I'm going to get them all the support that they need. And I'm not saying that public schools are without their own flaws. Like, I did not have a great experience getting an IEP in place for Victoria at Westfield. And I did it by fighting as hard as I could, but she's got it and they're working on it and they're giving her the support that she needs so that she can be successful. But we've got to do better.
Uh, so the benefit of travel is that you get to see the way that other people do things. And you and I have traveled a lot.
A lot.
And I, yeah. And I was a stepmom to a kid in a different country, in a different school system. I've watched how different countries accommodate children with disabilities. Countries that have far fewer resources than our own. And what I've seen in places like Ireland, for example, is you can take a child with a disability and give them a helper, and then they help them through their classes with their homework and all of that. And that actually is a model for success. So I understand whenever public schools would be challenged because they don't have the staff, they don't have the resources, or whatever. Private schools, I don't think, have those same limitations. They could, within their budget, provide for things like that, whether or not they are legally required to. But I think this begs the larger question of what are we actually doing to advance any sort of applicable education for our kids to make them successful. And a model that I love is the Nordic model,
Mm.
specifically places like Sweden, and what they do up there is significantly different. Like, there is a reason why Finland, in particular, tests number one in the happiness scale, I think, every single year for a while. And it is because they value education and they make a choice. When we're talking about choices, they have decided that their education system is one of the most important aspects of their society. Teachers are one of the most revered positions to have in that country, in Finland in
Right.
particular, but also in a lot of Nordic countries. People are in competition to get teacher jobs because there's such a high bar, because they believe that their children are the future and investing in their children will make them more advanced and more successful as a society as a whole. And I'm just saying we could use that example here in the US because we're doing the opposite. We're
The
trying to
opposite.
do the bare minimum, the bare minimum. And what would happen if we flipped it and did the maximum? What would happen if places like Eli Lilly, and like I said, not trying to burn Eli Lilly, we just happen to be talking about Park Tudor and that, massive endowment. What would happen if a place like Eli Lilly, instead of giving money to Park Tudor, decided to invest that money in the public school systems in Indianapolis? What would it look like if we have a more equal distribution of education to make sure that all of the kids in Indianapolis receive an adequate education to make them successful? What would happen to the future of Indiana in particular if we did that?
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think the complexity is, right? If I were to put myself in Eli Lilly's shoes for a second, like it's not so
Sure.
simple to just give money to a public school or to Indiana, right? Like our
Mm-hmm.
systems are so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
bureaucratic that it's not so simple as
Yep.
that. It's a lot easier for the endowment to write a check to Park Tutor and it's done, it's clean and all of the things, okay? But what if we did a pilot? Okay? We start small and we prove this. Okay? So we go to, let's just take my public school district. Let's take one school. Let's take Shamrock Springs Elementary School. And what if we said, we're going to pay those teachers an Eli Lilly salary, and instead of them making $60,000 a year, they're going to make $250,000 a year. And instead of, um, you know, hoping that the support is there, they're going to say, we're going to give you the support that you need. We're going to give you $12 million. Okay, so we're going to put these salaries in place. I guarantee you that the competition for the absolute best teachers would happen. Why wouldn't we want the brightest and the best teaching our kids? And instead, we have people that are just passionate about kids, which is great. And I love that. And there are some phenomenal teachers. But why are they not the most highest paid? Why are we relying on subpar or and that's not fair, okay? That's not fair because there's all different things, but why wouldn't we choose to make it the most sought after job possible because we give the best benefits to those individuals, because we give the best salary to those individuals so that they're able to give 150% to those kids. I would argue that you could try it. I would argue you could pilot it and prove it.
Well, I think the main difference is the U.S. has a different objective than a place like Finland. Our objective has been primarily to produce enough workers, and
Yeah.
that is the problem, because the way that we view our citizens is a resource, is a labor
Mm.
resource, and therefore it doesn't behoove us to invest an enormous amount of money to make that baseline as educated as possible, because when you give people education they start to question things, and that's what we don't want in the States. But I would
That's true.
argue that's what we need.
It
I
is what
think
we
that's what
need.
we need,
I agree.
because i had I had the opportunity to do some things when I was a child because of things that other people did. Like, for example, there's this program at Covington and in the surrounding areas that you can apply for whenever you're in high school to go to France to do like a study abroad. And so there was this artist, this French artist that moved to the area, married a local woman named Diarlier. And they created a foundation. And through this foundation, it was important to them that they take kids from the area and take them to France and teach them about art
The
and culture and
culture.
language. So that program is how I ended up, which my French is rusty. So, like, no judgment. I have small children, but that is how I ended up going to school for language, because I was
Mhm.
introduced to it by this guy who thought enough of this area to leave some money to send these kids to be educated. So, yes, I had to do the work. Yes, I had to apply. Yes, I had to do the application process and all of the things, but I had access. And I just think,
Exposure,
what
access.
an
Hmm.
amazing, yes, what an
Yeah.
amazing world we would have if we thought enough of our children to give them access. And I will also say this, now that I'm a grown up, especially, just running for political office and all these things, there is a through line in the neurodiverse community. That is where I have found the most empathetic people, the most like social justice driven individuals. Like, I personally believe the neurodiverse community, we're the canaries in the coal mine, we're the innovators, we think outside the box. Why would you take these children and isolate them and browbeat them to a point where they hate school? Why not integrate them and let their juices flow amongst their fellow students to just
Well, I think,
show there are different ways of thinking? I don't know.
well, I mean, and if you look around at some of the more successful individuals, right, they also will self proclaim that they're neurodiverse. So, why wouldn't we set these individuals who think differently, who see patterns and ways that the world needs, up for success and surround others, right? We know that it can't just take one human, right? The best in recipe for success is that you've got a group of individuals with a common goal, right? But they all have different skills and experiences. And that's the beauty of diversity, right? Like diversity of thought, diversity of color, diversity of background, diversity of the way you think, the way you process. That's truly what makes success. Like, I fundamentally believe, and I know from working at Lilly, that diversity is a superpower. And if you can actually unlock that superpower and create that secret sauce, you can do anything. So I think it goes back to, we live in a society right now where we don't want to unlock the potential in everyone because we aren't willing to do the hard work to put everybody together. So we really don't want to unlock the potential. We want people to just vanilla. No, vanilla's boring. I want Rocky
Vanilla is
Road.
super boring.
Give me
Yeah.
mint chocolate
And
chip.
the US is Rocky Road. The US has always been Rocky Road. That is why
And
I
it
think
should
it's so
be.
ridiculous now that there's such a push for, like, let's get back in the box, like very much like the LGBTQ plus community, right? Like, crawl back in the closet. No, like, the closet was damp
It's
and dark
open.
and awful. No,
There's no more
nobody
closet.
wants to go back in the closet. No, no more closet, no more
But we're
boxes.
trying to shove
And I
people
think that's
back
part
in.
of, yeah, I think that's part of what I'm seeing right now that I've had some of the experiences that I have recently, which, by the way, I would have never thought that I would have run for political office in a million years. The reason I did was because what I saw, and because I'm autistic and I have a shtick for social justice. So what I see in other individuals, the change makers, the true change makers, they're also neurodivergent. They've also been through these different experiences. They have lived experience that tells them and shows them statistically that when you lock people in a box, when you don't let their, juices flow, when you don't encourage their creativity, it doesn't benefit anyone. If you do
No,
the reverse, like we're talking about, like for our kids right now, because like we've discussed on many occasions, we've got many different kids. Here, Sissy, I've got one up right now. We've got many different kids just in our families here that when we put together, they're all different and yet they flourish and they jive off of one another. And I think
right?
it's really important moving forward to I don't want to isolate my kids. Like I've had to isolate my kids enough, and it sometimes takes a lifetime to just find your people, and that's
Hmm.
part of the reason why I started this podcast, right? Because I was like, hey, there's enough going on that's bad. We need to do something about this.
I agree. I mean, and I think that what my experience has been is, because my autistic daughter does not always present in the way that people who don't know autism might think an autistic child presents. For example, she's verbal, she's quite social and outgoing, yet she's really high support, right? Like autism has levels and she's actually a level 2, so she's pretty high support kiddo. And I love it when there's someone who doesn't have the experience and I say, "Oh, actually my daughter's autistic." And they're like, "Oh, wow. Like I didn't know that." And they were thinking one thing and you can help them expand their perspective into something different, right? And I just think that what you said earlier continues to stick with me about this whole, like, why I feel so, upset about the lawsuit is like it's about humanity, right? Like we need to put humanity first over money, right? And this feels very much like we are putting money and power first, right? Like I told you so. Da, 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 da. Give me that 6,000. Give me that $26,000, right? Fine, you can have it. Like the money is not the issue. It's the point that what you're doing is wrong. And we need to be a more humanity driven world. And they certainly need to be a more humanity driven organization. I founded Waves of Change Foundation for Neurodiversity because I wanted to be able to provide resources for free for neurodiverse kiddos, right? We know that there's not the support for siblings, right? We know there's not the support for, family members in the way that they need it. And I struggle when you then look at institutions that just are looking at money over humanity, profit over people, right? No, it's people over profit. You need
Well,
profit,
you're
you need
taking my
money.
campaign slogan right there.
I mean, you need money in order to make things happen. It's important. But Eli Lilly and Company is a medicines company that's about humans at its core. And yes, they get revenue to help discover other medicines for other humans. But this scenario feels very much like profit over people, like power over humanity. Like they're trying to prove a point that, yeah, we really don't give two shits about disabled kids. Okay, then let's move forward and
It
see if
would
we have a
appear that way to
discrimination
me
case.
as well. Speaking of
Cabot, I
humanity
lost
and little
you.
humans, that's why I turned my screen off. No, we're good. I have my screen off because I'm making bottles right now. Because speaking of humanity, I have two little humans that are like, hey, it's breakfast time. And being that they are neurodivergent, I have two kids that still take bottles. And that's just, another little discriminatory thing that I have to deal with on the daily, whether it's through my family or other people, right? They're like, oh,
Right.
like, why is that kid still taking a bottle? And I'm like, at the end of the day, does it matter? Like, if it makes them
But
happy, helps them function, that's what it's about.
But I'll tell you a real scientific reason why the bottle still matters. Because we know that sucking is very powerful form of self-regulation in the central nervous system. Neurodiverse kids need more sensory input. And so sucking through a small hole, like either a straw, a sippy cup, a bottle, allows the body to pull into the system and it actually soothes the central nervous system. Okay. And we know that our kiddos get kind of traffic jams in their brainstem. And so it's more difficult for them to regulate their central nervous system than other kiddos. And so I would argue that the scientific reason is very clear. Just like if a kid was drinking through a milkshake through a straw, that's incredibly soothing to the central nervous system because it's a heavy lifting activity. And so my daughter, who's 6.5, also still drinks milk out of a sippy cup. And it's not because she needs a sippy cup or wants a sippy cup. It's because her central nervous system deserves the regulation. Just like your kids' central nervous system deserves the regulation when they wake up. Think of my cup of coffee. Like, I deserve my cup of coffee in the morning. I need a minute. I need a beat. It's the same thing. It just looks different. And looking different is poison. Those might, don't eat those, please. Go ask Granny. Those could be poisonous. Thank you. You have
Speaking of
poisonous
kids,
berries. Yes, speaking of my young children. But like, I think this is where, as we think about the autism space, like I spend a ton of my time helping people understand like the scientific reason to believe, because it's so much easier for people to believe science than it is for people to believe what if, right? And so like oftentimes, I will say, you know, when kids are melting down, it's not a behavioral meltdown. It's that they've lost access to their prefrontal cortex, which is where we do all the executive functioning, right? Like if your brain, you've heard the term, right? Tabitha, flipping your lid, right? Okay, well, when our kids in their brainstem get a sensory overload, they flip their lid. What that means, if this is the brain, they flip their lid. They lose access to their executive functioning in their prefrontal cortex, which is just processing, reason, et cetera, which is why we can't reason with our kids in this moment, because they can only access the midbrain. And the midbrain is where everything happens, fight or flight. My life is in danger. I must fight or I must flight. And oftentimes our kiddos lose their language. They lose their words. They lose the ability to tell us what they need. Okay, until their body is able to calm down and then they can re-access their executive functioning. And so this is where I struggle with so often people in public will see a meltdown and it'll look like a parent is giving in or accommodating or whatever. No, parent is trying to regulate the child so child can access their executive functioning so that they can gain their words back to tell the parent or the caregiver exactly what they need in that moment. And the reality is it's just simple science. If I couldn't access my executive functioning for reason and I was in fight or flight, I'd be a disaster, a hot mess. No one would want to deal with me. So I don't know. That was just my thoughts on the
I,
bottle. And it really bothers me when people like they think it's a baby thing and it's a behavior or a parent issue, and it's not. It's about I am giving my kid the tool that they need to regulate. And that makes me a mom who cares about my kid, because a mom that doesn't is like, I'm going to take that away from you and I'm not going to replace it with another tool, right? So with my youngest, we do a lot of replacement strategies, right? She seeks one thing that might not be like she will sing at the top of her lungs, okay? So like sometimes that's not appropriate in the car because it really bothers my ears and everybody else that's around us. So we give her something that she can blow on instead that doesn't create a strong noise, but gives her the same sense of regulation that her body is seeking. So I don't know. I think society has a lot to learn about our special humans.
well, that's what makes me so excited, actually, about the type of things that we're doing, because, here we've joined together some women that are all from neurodiverse families, are actually neurospicy themselves. And we're starting to have these conversations, right? And we're like, I wonder what would happen if XYZ. Because I think there are enough of us now in these
Yeah.
spaces that have either, because we had neurodivergent children, have either started nonprofits, maybe are homeschooling our children. I mean, there's just this myriad of different things. But when you talk about change makers and you want to talk about innovation, especially in education, I mean, it doesn't get any more real than the autism space, especially in a state like Indiana that doesn't have a ton of resources, because
Right.
these parents are always in the trenches. They're like, okay, my kid's getting ready to be kicked out of public school because they can't handle them and XYZ. I need to figure out a system, or my kid's not regulating well. I need to figure out a system. So you're constantly trying to make something out of nothing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, I look forward to hearing from some contacts that you have that are lawyers that understand this space, because I think it's garbage. And, you know, it's for me, it's not about the money, it's about the principle. And if the fact of the matter is, if they're doing this to others, then people need to know. And they deserve to know. And the public does too.
I agree with you.
So, game on.
Well, let's do it. I'm going to put you in contact with some of the people that I know. I've got one working on a meltdown right here. So,
All right.
we will
Bye,
conclude
Tabitha.
this talk for now, and I'll get back to you. Hey, have a good day, everybody.
See you later.
We are at a pivotal point in American history. We do not have the luxury to remain silent. Programs are disappearing every day. We hope that this podcast raises awareness and sparks a sense of advocacy in you. We all can make a difference. The important thing is to start. See you next time.